Where does it go from there? How do you impress the gal? When you say you're looking at ET artifacts and she says, yawn, oh, I know that. Well, it's been interesting. That's all I'm going to say. It's been interesting. The point is that I believe Brookings is part of the lie. That now, not only are we ready, we're more than ready. You know, there's not going to be, remember that great line from Ghostbusters where Bill Murray says, you know, if this comes out, there'll be cats and dogs living together. No, it's not going to happen like that. People would basically yawn, except for a small cadre that would be really, really excited, and you're not going to have to worry about the fundamentally religious because they're not going to believe anything you show them. No, they won't. They live in their own bubble. They have their own, they're marching to a different drummer, depending upon whether it's Mohammed or Jesus or, you know, Buddha or whatever, and they're not going to be touched. They walk among us untouched by intrusions of secular realities. And so you're not going to have to worry about them. So who are they worried about? What's going to collapse civilization? Well, if you change the word collapse and make it change, what the people, I believe, at NASA are terrified of, and the people that actually run NASA above them, in fact, run major segments of the governments of the entire planet, because there's definitely collusion going on in this, they are afraid of that C word. No, not conspiracy. They're afraid of change. Because if you're at the top and things change, where's the only place left for you to go? And someone else. Okay? Just remember, guys, we're 22 on the New York Times bestseller list. That's change. So the third part of the triad is that NASA has had all these years the opportunity to hide everything. How? Because they control everything. With our tax dollars, they control the rockets, the spacecraft, the telemetry systems, the computers, the public information, you know, the scientists, the contracts, the grants, the grad students. They control every facet of the information transfer mechanism that would get the real stuff from where it was acquired out to all the rest of us. Means, motive, and opportunity. Everything of value, I believe, has been hidden since the congressional formation of NASA. Now, if that's true, then if someone comes along like this gentleman, Ken Johnston, who was the former guy in charge of the data and the photographs from Apollo in Houston, at the Manned Spacecraft Center, at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory. If some guy like this, in that process way back when, had a brain and actually, when he was ordered to do certain things that violated his sense of morality and his sense of ethics and his sense of what's wrong with this picture, he could become a real pain. And in fact, that's exactly what has happened. Ken and I, as you know, gave a press conference at the National Press Club a few days ago and had a remarkable showing of press talking about every facet of this story, except it's not our press. It's press from the Soviet Union. Now, or the former Soviet Union. Or is it the current Soviet? It's kind of hard to tell these days. Things are in fluid transition. Remember, Putin is KGB. And that tells us something. I'm not quite sure what. We'll just have to see how things evolve. Well, Ken was quietly minding his own business as a solar system ambassador, which is a very high prestige, zero paying job for JPL. You know, you would go around the country and you give lectures and you basically fill in the blanks about technical data and you make yourself available for schools or museums, and you know, it's basically a way to tap the NASA expertise of their alumni and provide what they call outreach. I love that term, outreach. Abominable term to the general public from NASA. So up until a few days ago, Ken was an ambassador, a solar system ambassador in good standing. This is an actual close-up of the JPL website, which listed his accomplishments in brief form, you know, Marine, flew aircraft, you know, F-4s in Vietnam, was a test conductor for the lunar module, taught the astronauts everything they knew, went on to control the data through Apollo, and we'll get into that in detail, has 3 degrees in aerospace engineering, master's in theology, and a PhD in metaphysics, which is really theology through a private university, which is a Baptist university. And then you can see the awards that he's had from JPL in appreciation for his services. Well, all was hunky-dory up until about a week after The Dark Mission came out on October 9th. 10 days. When suddenly, through the interesting inquiries of one James Oberg, who is a science writer, former NASA contract employee, contractor to the shuttle program, and now a science consultant correspondent with NBC, made an interesting inquiry to JPL looking into Ken Johnston's background. And as they say, proverbially, the dark black stuff hit the rotating receptacle. And Ken was fired from a job that doesn't pay anything. This is the official letter of dismissal. The only problem with it is it's a pack of lies, because it says that he agreed to resign. What actually happened was that Kay Ferrari, who was the head of the Solar Ambassadors program, called him up and basically pressured that he resign for the good of NASA and JPL. And when Ken temporized and asked, well, why should I? And, are there other people in NASA that have ideas that are not sanctioned? And she agreed there were, and that they were protected by the First Amendment. He was being singled out, for unequal treatment under no law that we can find. This is, in fact, a copy of the email that he sent shortly after the phone call, again on the morning of the 19th. The one thing I should mention is that this so-called resignation acceptance, which ostensibly was written on the 19th, came in by express mail almost 2 weeks later. So it clearly was backdated after they'd all huddled and said, what do we do about this guy? Because Ken was quoted in Dark Mission as basically telling the story of A, how he was instructed to destroy Apollo evidence, and B, how he saw them covering up photographs in certain areas that were classified and off limits to all but a few employees with high clearance, of which he happened to then be one as manager of the data. And that, of course, is an enormous embarrassment to the agency. And so this email is a direct contradiction in writing of his apparently accepting the offer to resign, because he did not. And so if we really want to make a fuss of it, he when he comes back from his vacation, which he did for the first time in many years, he took a vacation with Fran, his wife, and they're somewhere, I think in the Bahamas, and they'll get back in the middle of the month, and then we'll all discuss whether he should pursue legal recourse to actually force JPL to publish its records under FOIA and prove that they did not get this email, which of course they can't, because they did. What we showed at the press club was that this man, whose credentials were being assailed by third parties, and a JPL that was not happy with any controversy, and certainly what he was saying in Dark Mission, moved quickly to forget, has in fact a stunning record, both as a military patriot serving this nation proudly as a Marine, and in many other capacities over the course of his career. Here's a citation from Leathernet magazine going back to 1962. This is one from the Naval School, Pre-Flight School of Pensacola, where he began his aviation training back in the 60s. This is the Manned Spacecraft Center, where he then went to work as a member of Grumman's team who were building the actual lunar module. He helped design and worked on the training for the astronauts who actually use this. This is a letter written on July 28, 1969, from John Pierce, who was the crew procedures supervisor for the lunar module at Grumman.